Okay, nervous system regulation is just not enough. Not when you're feeling anxiety or anxious energy. Nervous system regulation is everywhere right now. Cold plunges, breath work, somatic tools, and yet so many women are still anxious. Why is that? Hands up if you've done these cold plunges, the breath work, the somatic tools, the nervous system regulation, but you still found yourself feeling anxious. I work with women who regulate daily, but they still struggle with anxiety. They still have that anxious energy hijacking them. Because regulation is powerful, it's helpful, it stabilizes. And I'm not here to dismiss it. It is super powerful. I am someone that also creates regulation practices for my clients because I believe in the power of regulating the nervous system constantly. Okay. So I'm not here to knock that. Okay. However, the way I see it is regulation manages the symptoms. It doesn't clear the source. And what I mean by that, it means regulating might get rid of some symptoms that you're experiencing, might calm the symptoms. But just like I'm always saying with the band-aid, you put the band-aid on, eventually it has to come off. And it's the same thing, if you're only regulating symptoms, eventually that symptom has to keep bubbling up until you clear the source of it. And that's the missing ingredient. That's why you can regulate all day long, okay? But still struggle with anxiety, okay? And regulation is kind of like, it's calming the wave. Resolution is removing what's creating the wave. Okay, you can't just have a calm, be anxiety free without actually understanding what created in the beginning, in the first place. And that's really super important. Just on a very little tangent quickly, you know, I've been in the healing space for about 10 years and I was doing all the healing modalities, regulating my nervous system quite regularly, but I was still struggling with anxiety, still having panic attacks. I was still living day in, day out with this anxious energy, you know, projecting it onto my family, and I was hijacking my life. And I was getting so frustrated. I'm like, why? I'm doing all this regulating work. And what was happening was I was regulating my symptoms. I was calming. I was really good at shifting my state. I was really good at shifting and calming my nervous system. I was really good at shifting how I was feeling. But eventually, the band-aid always had to come. I was kind of like the stove, the pot full of boiling water on the stove. Eventually, you put too much water and then it goes over. And that's exactly what happens when you're just focusing on the regulation, but not actually what's underneath the wave. What is the resolution? What is creating that wave? Okay, so the regulation is really important for like a maintenance, as a constant like top up to cleanse yourself, to cleanse your body and mind and soul. And it's really powerful. However, do you want to live in a place of being regulated, calm, centered, grounded? Because that's the difference between regulation from a grounded, centered place versus regulating to clear and release any symptom, knowing that, well, I haven't gone to the root of it, so then eventually it has to come back up again. Okay, it's costly. It costs you time, energy, money, freedom. It's exhausting. Okay, and when unresolved emotional events are cleared, okay, because emotional events from the past is what's creating that wave, and when you clear that, the system or your body no longer needs constant regulation. Yes, like I mentioned, super powerful, you'll still do it regularly, but there's a difference between needing to versus desiring to, because it's maintaining your field. And the way I see it is it's so much easier to not be anxious. It's so much easier to heal anxiety before you feel anxious instead of after the fact. It's kind of like when you get, you know, a headache. If you do all the right things to avoid getting a headache, it's easier to then get over it, if that makes sense. It's easier to avoid it. It's easier to keep it to a minimum if you're doing all the groundwork and the foundations first. Instead, what people do is they wait until that boiling point, and then they just need to clear and get rid of. Okay, and this is the difference. Is what we're teaching here is getting to the unresolved emotional events, clear them out, and then you no longer need constant regulation because you're going to be living in a state of regulation. All you're doing is maintaining with you. And if you're regulating constantly and you still feel stuck, you still have that anxious energy, you still struggle with anxiety, then my free workshop breaks down why and what actually creates permanent relief. Okay, so I'll link that workshop in the description. But you can also, and I want to see you to watch my video on how to stop overthinking when nothing else has worked, because I really believe that the constant overthinking leads people to wanting to regulate, because if they can't, they'll stop overthinking and having this monkey brain and all that. So I'll see you in that video also, all about how to stop overthinking when nothing else has worked.